There are a bunch of unique and different locations in the Pikmin series. Some are better designed than others, so it was time to ask the community what their favorite was, as well as make my own ranking of the locations. To figure out the community favorite, just like in the other 3 tournaments I've done, I placed them all into a bracket using RNG. And yes, I included Hey Pikmin because they were included in previous tournaments as well, so it just felt fitting to include them in this as well. At this point I sound like a broken record if you've seen the previous videos, but I believe the community responses are an accurate representation of the entire Pikmin community, due to ratios remaining consistent regardless of the amount of votes after they pass a certain threshold. With all this explanation stuff out of the way, it's time to get into the brackets. Starting off the tournament strong, we have one location from each of the first 4 games. To no big surprise, we have the Hey Pikmin location in last place with only 4%. Followed by the Forest Navel at 21%, the Perplexing Pool at 24%, and winning with the majority of the vote we have Pikmin 3's The Distant Tundra at 51%. Next up in the following bracket we have the Verdant Waterfront in last place, followed by the Lush Life Merc, and the Rescue Command Post sitting at 24%, which I honestly don't know why this got so many votes, like it's a location. It's got the Sage Leaf, which is pretty cool, but I mean, most people probably weren't thinking about that, so there's not too much to this location. It is what it is, I guess, though. Anyways, in first place we have the Valley of Repose. In this wild bracket we have the Sparkling Labyrinth in last place, followed by the Tropical Wilds losing to the Wistful Wilds.
The hardest choices require the strongest wills.
And the Garden of Hope in first place. The next bracket had the last area of Hey Pikmin coming in last place with 2% of the vote, followed by the Ravaged Rustworks, then the Forest of Hope, and in first place we have the Hero's Hideaway at 70% of the vote. The following bracket had Snowfall Field falling into last place, with a tie for second place between the Sun-Speckled Terrace and the Final Trial. And with a very high 76%, we have the Serene Shores. Next we have something that many people thought couldn't be done. We have Leaf Swirl Lagoon beating the Impact site, proving that Hey Pikmin can actually win against some of the mainline Pikmin areas. Up next was Pikmin 1's Distant Spring at 24%, and in first place we have Pikmin 3's Twilight River. The following bracket had the closest results we've had so far in the tournament, with Brilliant Garden coming in 4th place, followed by the Formidable Oak. Then we have the Primordial Thicket, and Giant's Hearth in first place with 44%. And with that, the first round of brackets is done, and we move on to the second set of rounds. There are a few locations here that didn't participate in the first round, so you'll be seeing those soon. And by seeing those soon, I mean right now in this first bracket, where we have the Distant Tundra in last place with 17%, and my favorite location coming in second with only 25%. Don't worry though, Awakening Woods. I'll always remember the 190 days I spent there back in 2004. Moving on, we have the Blossoming Arcadia in first place with 59%. And hey, this is the location I've been using for all the backgrounds in the tournaments, mainly since the falling petals look really nice and it just works quite well in the video. For the next bracket we had the Valley of Repose losing to the Garden of Hope. Then something happened that surprised me. This is because of other polls I've seen. In my poll, however, we have the Hero's Hideaway beating the Serene Shores. This is the one part where the ratio part I explained at the beginning of the video doesn't really add up. There are a number of factors that could influence why one location beat the other one. The biggest one is probably the time gap. One was done a couple months ago, and this one was done more recently. And only the hardest core of Pikmin fans are still watching and consuming Pikmin content at this point. The following bracket had the Giant's Hearth defeating the Twilight River. And with that, the second set of rounds is complete, and we move on to the semifinals. In the semifinals, we have the Final Hope of Pikmin 3. However, the Garden of Hope ended up losing to the Blossoming Arcadia. And in the other semifinals, we have the Hero's Hideaway beating the Giant's Hearth. That closes the semifinals, and we move on to the third place as well as the finals. In third place, it goes to the Garden of Hope with 69% of the vote. Now we finally have the finals. Blossoming Arcadia against Hero's Hideaway. But there was a clear winner with 72% of the vote, we have Heroes Hideaway. I guess since Blossoming Arcadia is only the second favorite and Heroes Hideaway is the community's most favorite, I should probably change the background for future videos to Heroes Hideaway. We have the most unique area winning the tournament. I'd put a lot more happy comments, but the vocal minority in the comment sections was not happy with the results. Which, I mean, is fair enough since Heroes Hideaway is cool, but it doesn't really match the aesthetic with the other areas. A few people claimed recency bias, and it got... whoa. It got the same amount of likes essentially as the post. The only thing is this comment doesn't really make sense since both of these areas are equally as recent. So, yeah? It's also been 3 months since the game has been released, so again, only the hardcore Pikmin fans are consuming content at this point. Any Piktuber will tell you that they're getting like 15% of the views of what they used to get. So recency bias is very unlikely here since, by internet standards, 3 months is pretty much ancient. I know that won't leave the people in the comment section very satisfied, which is why I mentioned the thing at the beginning of the video. I said there would be a tier list, and here is my tier list taking into account the comment section as well as community feedback from across the tournament. To get started, we're going to work from the bottom up and then have our S tiers at the very end. Starting off D tier, we have the Rescue Command Post. Now I know I've already got some people upset with this, but hear me out. It's not really a level, it's a hub. It's meant for you to talk to characters and whatnot. It's a really well designed hub, it's not a level. It does have the Sage Leaf missions, but most people don't even think about this when they think about the Rescue Command Post, so I don't think it should go higher than D tier. Next up we have the Final Stretch. While this is a great final boss, again it's not really a level or location. And we're taking into account the physical location, the caves if present, the enemies, music, bosses, all that good stuff. So this does have good music and a good boss fight, but again it doesn't even have a location, so that's why this is also in D tier. With that said, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the final trial is also in D tier. It's got a boss fight, and it has a little bit of a level. I'd honestly probably put this below the Final Stretch, but since this one does check more participation boxes, it gets a little bit of a lead. Sparkling Labyrinth is next up, and this area is annoying. Extremely annoying if you're trying to save all the Pikmin to get a gold medal for it. The reason for this is because it has not one but 2 annoying levels with this little. On to C tier. Leaf Swirl Lagoon. It's got some unique mechanics which are fairly enjoyable, however much of these levels have a falling section, which is a cool gimmick, but I just personally didn't really like these. Lush Life Murk also has some cool areas and interesting level design choices. I was gonna put it higher up, but then I remembered that Burning Bog exists. Next up we have the Impact Site. While this is the first area to start it all, it's super simple, and to be fair it is the first location and tutorial, but with that said, it's again not really that good, so it can't really place much higher than C tier. Next up, some of you guys probably saw this coming and others are going to be upset about it, but the Formidable Oak is at the top of C tier. This one falls into the same category as the previous final bosses mentioned earlier. Now don't get me wrong, this level has a lot more to it, but at the end of the day it's just a big boss fight in an arena. A really well done boss fight, but it's not really a location, at least to the standards of having new enemies, treasures, stuff to explore, and whatnot. Everything in B tier and above is honestly just well designed. The difference between B and all the way to S tier honestly isn't that much, and a lot of it will come down to personal preference. With that said, starting off with B tier, we have the Brilliant Garden, the tutorial area of Hey Pikmin. Now, I know that Hey Pikmin haters are mad that any area from this game is placing higher than some of the Pikmin 3 and Pikmin 1 locations. But to be completely honest, this area is well made, and if you actually did enjoy Hey Pikmin, you'd understand this. Verdant Waterfront is another area that's well done. The developers for Hey Pikmin tried to add new gimmicks for each of the locations in order to make them all feel unique when playing the game. So for this reason, this area gets to place in the B tier. Snowfall Field places up next. There's honestly not too much else to say, it also adds some new gimmicks, and it's what allows Hey Pikmin to have the areas stand out from each other. The Forest Navel is following up, and I can already hear the comments coming. The reason for this area getting B tier is that people either really love it, or really hate it. I've seen arguments for both sides, so to balance it out, I'm just gonna put it in B tier. Now we have the Distant Tundra. It's a good area, but I'd honestly argue it's one of the weaker areas of Pikmin 3. I can honestly see it going into A tier, but I also didn't want to flood the top brackets too much. Ravaged Rustworks is up next, and this area honestly just has great music and levels. I personally found these areas to be really enjoyable. Sweltering Parchlands continues to add cool mechanics and intense moments for Hey Pikmin that can be a lot of fun. And now we have the A tier, which has some of the best stuff that the Pikmin series has to offer. Starting off, we have the Sun-Speckled Terrace. Now this area is pretty simple. I can see some people arguing that it could go a bit lower since there's nothing too complex with it. However, this is essentially Pikmin 4's tutorial area and it does an excellent job at that. Twilight River is up next, and this area is super nice and is great to traverse with blue and winged Pikmin. But it's a little bit annoying to do with the other types, so for that reason it stays in A tier. The tutorial area of Pikmin 2 Valley of Repose. It's honestly just a good introduction to Pikmin 2 and many Pikmin fans' first area that they ever explored. I just have to put it up in A tier. Tropical Wilds, a solid location with good level design and interesting bosses. The 4th place of the tournament is next up, and we have the Giant's Hearth. I was thinking of placing it a bit higher, but honestly, apart from the hearth itself, it's a fairly open area. The caves aren't anything too crazy, so for that reason it places here. Wistful Wilds is up next. I could see you arguing that it should go lower just based on the above ground area. But as I mentioned earlier, caves count towards the overall ranking, which Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 4 areas benefit greatly from. And Wistful Wilds has some great caves, with the Hole of Heroes, Cavern of Chaos, and of course, the Dream Den. Closing off A tier, we have the Forest of Hope. I was thinking of placing this in S tier, but decided not to. It's still an amazing area, like everything else that's placed B tier and higher. But now we move on to the goated Pikmin areas. These areas are often regarded as the best the series has to offer. Starting off this bracket, we have the Blossoming Arcadia. This is a beautiful area, and it's what I use in the backgrounds of all my tournaments. The level design and caves are pretty solid. I'd honestly place it in A tier beside the Sun-Speckled Terrace, but as I said, I was taking into account community feedback and comments, and since this literally came in 2nd place, it's only fair to put it in S tier. Heroes Hideaway is up next, and I know this is the winner from the tournament, so shouldn't it be at the top of S tier? Yes, but also no. It's for sure the most unique area in the entire series, but it's also the most open, and it doesn't really have anything as shortcuts, hazards, or strategy really involved in traversing the area. Now I'm not saying it's bad, far from it, but it's also not the best from a level design perspective. It also doesn't match the art direction that the other games had. This isn't really a strike against it, but it is worth mentioning. Okay, at this point, it's probably sounding like I don't like this area, but again, I put it in S tier, and I do think it should be placed in S tier. My favorite area is up next. We have the Awakening Woods. Now this one I placed here on a 100% biased basis, but I don't care. It gets S tier for the following reasons. The aesthetic is great, the caves are memorable, the music is perfect. Garden of Hope is next up. This area has not one but 2 great bosses. Level design is good, and the music is also good. Perplexing Pool. I love this level, but I also hate this level too. It's got this, which traumatized me as a child, but it's also got that great music. It's got Beady Longlegs jump scare, it's got the submerged castle, and Glutton's Kitchen. This level essentially represents Pikmin. It has areas that are scary, but also whimsical and funny. Primordial Thicket is up next. Now, most people prefer Giant's Hearth over this area, as was seen in the tournament. This area is more dense, which leads to a lot more intricate things that can be done. The caves are also super solid, with the mud pit being kind of annoying, but also kind of fun at the same time. And of course the final cave in the game, which was a lot of fun to complete. Now we have Serene Shores. This is for a few reasons. The first being the rising and lowering tide. The enemies are also super cool, and the caves gave us Groovy. And Groovy is great. Serene Shores is like the Perplexing Pool, as it has scary levels, literally with Submerged Castle 2.0, and it also has fun whimsical areas as well. being a true representation of what Pikmin is. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Distant Spring. The Distant Spring is such a nice area. It plays into the feel of mystery and wonder. I mean, Smoky Prague is literally the embodiment of that mysterious, wonderful, and terrifying at the same time that Pikmin has always been for a lot of people. All of these placed in S tier can go in any order. If you want to argue Garden of Hope goes at the top, I completely and utterly accept that, as all of these are peak Pikmin in my eyes. I read a lot of comments and took into account a lot of feedback and opinions when doing this, but I know that everyone has their own unique rankings. With that said, drop a like, a sub, and comment below.